Hello my soccer universe, to the long overdue review of round 33 in Serie A, a round that was totally overshadowed by the Pope's passing on Easter Monday when 4 games were scheduled, duly were cancelled. However, I have to give Serie A a little bit of credit that they realized we have a really serious fixture congestion if we don't play this soon, so they played them actually already on Wednesday. Hence I decided to actually postpone. Even if they wouldn't have been played, I actually want to wait for the Milan derby between Inter and Milan in the Coppa Italia semi-final. What can I say? Milan for now salvaged their season just a teeny bit by reaching a second final this season. So Coppa Italia potentially begging. Let's see. It would be great to finally win this title after 23 years. And all I can say is if Milan could play Inter all the time, Milan would be really happy and would be really sitting high in the table this season. And that is not something I would have said ahead of the season, going into the season with 6 straight losses to Inter. So that trend definitely reversed. It also caps an absolute horrific week or semi-week for Inter, who not only lose to Milan at home in the Coppa Italia with a changed squad, but also 1-0 at Bologna, and now Napoli are level, and we might have a deciding game for the title. We gotta see. Everyone says that Inter's upcoming schedule is a little bit tougher. I thought that the Bologna game was the toughest going ahead. Maybe tiredness could play into it. I just don't see anything that really convinces me of Napoli either, which also means that the race for the Champions League spots is rather wide open. And have in mind, most likely Milan playing Bologna in the Coppa Italia final if Milan wins that one. So it gets really, really tight. So I think all these teams fighting for European spots actually hope Bologna to win the Coppa Italia, because then at least 7th also qualifies for Europe. So very interesting situation. We also had an absolute wild game on the bottom of the table with 2 losers. And that's all what we are talking about now, including also the Coppa action in the summary of matchday 33, plus 1 Coppa Italia semi-final return leg. Napoli drew level with Inter with a game more after a very flat performance at last place Monza. That's a Monza team that's more or less relegated, but McTominay with a header gives Napoli the 3 points and thus putting a little bit more pressure on Inter. And late on, Inter succumbed to the pressure, and now both of the title candidates are level on points. It is Orsolini who gives Bologna the 3 points with a wonderful scissor kick finish in the 94th minute after a really flat and not so interesting game overall, where I really felt that Bologna had a little bit more, but Inter just kept tight and were already more focused on maybe resting players and maybe, looking forward to bigger tasks ahead. But that loss was not in Inter's favor, and Inter again, when they started to defend, this is where Inter currently are not very good at. And so, another loss in Bologna for Inter. Does this mean another championship lost in Bologna? After matchday 33, it's more or less certainty that Milan cannot reach Europe through the league. They lose at home to Atalanta in a really, really weird game. Both teams mirroring each other's systems. Milan playing for a second time in a row with the 3 at the back, but unlike against Udinese, this time it didn't really work. It was a stalemate for most of the first half. There was one good run by Leao that was then flagged off for offside, although he started in his own half. But Atalanta maybe had the slightly better chances. At the beginning of the second half, Milan really came out, created chances. However, it was always the last pass or the last shot missing. It was more like getting in dangerous areas but not quite completing the job. And by pushing so much forward, it happens as you would expect. You get caught out on a counter attack, and in the 62nd minute Ederson finishes that one, and then Milan had a really hard time of getting back into the game, let alone creating chances. And also the substitutions really didn't make sense. You really had the feeling that they're saving themselves already for the Coppa Italia against Inter. Roma continued their long unbeaten run under Ranieri with a rather lackluster 1-0 home win. The winning goal came very early through Shomurodov in the 4th minute, and Venezia offered way too little in order to threaten the Romans. And on the weekend we also had two really big results in the relegation battle. Lecce put themselves in danger of falling into the relegation zone by losing at home to high-flying Como 3-0. João scoring a brace in the process, opening score in the third and sealing the deal in the 94th, Goldoniga in the 84th, making it 2-0, and all efforts by Lecce were thwarted at that point. And so it was clear that the winner between Empoli and Venezia will overtake Lecce. However, there was no winner. It was an absolute wild game, especially in the second half, when Fazzini gave Empoli in the 59th minute the lead. However, Yeboah and Busio turned it around for Venezia, and you thought it's a really big win for Venezia, who finally can get the 3 points. Alas, just 2 minutes after Busio scored the go-ahead goal, Anjorin gets the equalizer, and so that exciting game ends with 2 losers. With a 2-win comeback win at Cagliari, Fiorentina keep the slim hopes for a European spot next season alive. The comeback win is because Piccoli gave Cagliari, who still are slightly threatened by relegation but look overall safe, a 1-0 lead already in the 7th minute. Gosens though equalized in the 36th, and the winning goal came through Beltran right after half-time. And looking at the stats, it was a deserved win for Fiorentina. Meanwhile, Lazio stay very much in the running for a top 4 finish, which would mean Champions League, and were helped of course by an Otoa red card in the 22nd minute for Genoa. Then Castellanos 10 minutes later opens the scoring for Lazio. The Bulladia in the 65th doubles it up, and then they get it home despite being also reduced to 10 men in the 73rd minute. It was clear the shock on early Wednesday evening when Parma, who had been on a long unbeaten run, I think at least 5 draws in a row, beat Juventus at home 1-0 with the winning goal coming through a Pellegrino header after a really nice Valeri cross just before the half-time break. And Parma really saw that out, and with some luck could have even doubled it up. Another flat performance by Juventus, where you thought they just had gotten the turnaround. Seemingly absolutely not. But at least one Turin team gets the win. Torino beat Udinese 2-0 at home thanks to a Shea Adams goal in the 39th minute and a Dembélé goal in the 85th minute. The mood at Milan, at least until the final, is all good now, because they again beat Inter, emphatically so, 3-0 in the return leg of the Coppa Italia semi-final, and qualify for the final to salvage somewhat their season with a cup title. They probably will face Bologna in said final. However, that derby was a really weird one, because Inter went in with a changed lineup. You know, that squad seems tired, whereas Milan played the same lineup that disappointed already on the weekend. And early signs were not good and in favor of Milan, because Inter had more of the game. It was a relatively wild opening phase, but Milan rarely could get into the attacking third, whereas Inter actually did. There were good chances by Darmian. I think Di Marco hit the upside of the crossbar. There was a good chance by Lautaro. There was also another good chance by Lautaro just when the game had settled a little bit, with a finish that he attempted similar like what he did in Munich. However, this time he skied almost into second tier of the San Siro, actually where the Milan fans were standing. And then it's a Jimenez cross in after they gained the ball up high, and TJ Reijers nicely plays the ball out towards. Jimenez crosses in, and Luka Jovic, forgotten also because Pulisic and more Milan players were in there, can head it in freely, and it's 1-0 Milan against the run of play. And despite Bisek having then 2 half chances right after that, that's how it went into halftime. And right after halftime, Milan settles the game more or less after Theo Corna. It is again Jovic who is in the right position after the ball falls after a tussle between Barella and Leao right in front of his feet, and it's 2-0 in the 49th minute. And that goal rattled Inter quite a bit, and with a little bit more clinical finishing, Milan could have ended the game right there and then. The chances were there, but there were many blocked shots. I remember one by Tijani Reinders. There was also a Jimenez chance where I guess he was probably offside, but it was really glaring how Inter were not solid enough. And Inzaghi really reacted to that when he brought Milan, Zalewski, Arnautovic, Çalhanoğlu, and Fratesi. And yes, chances then did fall to Inter, none bigger than a De Vrij header where Maignan made a glorious save. But also Arnautovic was a few times in dangerous situations. But you always felt with another counter-attack, Milan can settle the game. And that's exactly what happened when Leao plays it over to Reinders, who finishes from a tight angle in the 85th minute. It's a 3-0 win for Milan. At least there's a Coppa Italia final and the chance to win this trophy for the first time in 23 years. So with Milan in the final, if we look at the table right now, if Milan win the Coppa Italia, this means they will go into the Europa League. Meaning that only 5th place will also go in the Europa League and 6th goes in the Conference League. Should Bologna win that one and Bologna finish in the top 4, or even if they finish in the top 5, then 6th will go to the Europa League and 7th will go into the Conference League, as you would normally suggest. So this Coppa Italia final can have serious implications on who will play in Europe and who will play not. Honestly, Milan don't really deserve playing in Europe, but on the other side, if I can see my club win another title, one that I actually cherish in a way because you win it so rarely, I actually want to see that one. On top of the table, Inter, Napoli, level and points. And the head-to-head is also level with 2-1-1 draws. So the two are only separated by goal difference. And here Serie A have a little quirk in there. Because they say, yeah, the goal difference decides, but only decides the home field advantage in a decisive Spareggio, as it is called. The last one we had was in 63, where Bologna beat Inter for the title. So Inter, again, maybe in such a weird configuration. There are also other considerations that have to be taken account of. The only place where this Spareggio could be played would be on the Wednesday ahead of the Champions League final. Not a good timing. And also, if there are other situations play into security and so on, maybe you could move it to Rome, but then you would have a much more even ticket allocation. So that is still to be decided. I think Spareggio would also happen for relegation, but I'm not 100% there. If we look at the relegation on the bottom, Venezia Empoli sitting on 25 points inside of the relegation zone, Lecce with 26. Only one of these three will survive. Recent form probably would suggest Venezia, but I think both Lecce and Empoli have also a good chance of survival. At the moment, Empoli is given the best chance, although I think they probably look the worst of all three of them. Monza already down and out, and I think with that win for Parma also looks safe, as do Verona, and I guess Cagliari also. The upcoming games this evening while I'm shooting this video, so probably after you see this, we already had the return leg of the Coppa Italia semi-final. Bologna have a 3-0 lead, so there's really not much to talk home about. But the Friday game has already been postponed because the physio of Atalanta has also passed, so that game has to be played sometime soonish as well. I don't exactly know. But due to the Pope's funeral taking place on Saturday, all the other Serie A games are on Sunday and on Monday, so it's a very condensed schedule. We have, for instance, two 12:30 kickoffs. One, of course, is Venezia against Milan. The other one doesn't have much bearing for the table, but Venezia against Milan will be for relegation interesting. As is the derby between Fiorentina and Empoli. Fiorentina still have an outside chance for Europe. Empoli want to avoid relegation. And, of course, title. It's probably the biggest game of the weekend. Inter against Roma. Roma still on a very long unbeaten streak and Inter really reeling. Juve against Monza. You would think that Juve should win that one. I don't put anything past Juve right now. Napoli have to win at home against Torino. I mean, Torino is more or less on the beach already. All to play for Napoli. However, I expect a grind out win there. And then other interesting games, of course, Bologna need to get the points at Udinese. Lazio against Parma, again, top and bottom of the table, kind of playing in there, although, as I said, Parma looks safe for now. And Verona against Cagliari, probably one to put aside. There's not too much at stake, but the winner definitely will be safe. As I said, the Pope's passing majorly impacted this round with so many games being postponed and played. The next review video will most likely happen on Tuesday, maybe even on Wednesday, depending on how things work out for me. I will definitely make a short review, of course, of the second leg of the Coppa Italia semifinal, although I don't see the big miracle by Empoli given the Bologna play at home. But the next round, I think Inter-Roma will tell us a whole lot about this title fight. And if Inter should drop points there, then I think everything opens up for Napoli, where everyone says they have the easiest schedule going in. Please let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Subscribe to my channel if you want to see more videos like these, and I will talk to you soon with more things in my Serie A universe. Bye! Hey there! I really hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, here are some videos and playlists that you may enjoy too. Also, please consider subscribing to my channel and hit the little bell icon so you get notified whenever something happens in my soccer universe. And with that, have a wonderful day. Bye!